Hello, hello, beautiful beings. I am your host, Thais Sky. Welcome to Reclaim the Podcast. It is such an honor to have you here with me. Today, I want to talk about the 3 habits of worth. I want to talk about what is a habit of worth. I want to talk about these 3 habits. And I also want to talk about how we can incorporate these habits into our lives. Welcome to Reclaim, a podcast for women, by women, on conversations that matter. I am your host, Thais Sky, international speaker, teacher, and a certified life coach currently working to become a licensed psychotherapist in the state of California. Join me here every week as I offer thoughts and interviews on what it means to reclaim your humanness in this messy world. But before I do that, this is your kind reminder that we are in worthiness season, which means we are in celebration mode over the fact that the doors are open to my signature group program, Worthy Women Rise, and that these doors close Wednesday, February 26th. And so if you are interested in this program, go to worthywomenrise.com to learn more and get your application in before doors close. And if you're new to all of this and you're like, what is Worthy Women Rise? Well, I'm glad that you asked. Worthy Women Rise is a 5-month program. It's really a quest of healing, created to support you to reclaim your worth, integrate your shadow, and step into your authentic self. I've been leading this program since 2015. This will be my 9th cohort. And I just love this program so much. I pour my mastery into this program. I give it everything I got because I truly believe that while we know that it's important to feel worthy and nourished, internalizing that worth can often feel really, really hard. That has been true for me, and it has been true for so many women who have come into the program. And so what this program does is support you in navigating your unworthiness and changing your relationship with your unworthiness and with yourself so that you can feel a greater sense of worth in this world. Because, when we decide we want to take up greater space, do bigger work, feel more confident, we want to create the type of relationship that, feels really inspiring to us. We want to become entrepreneurs or level up in our entrepreneurial work. We want to ask for a raise, get that promotion. We inevitably bump up against a lot of internalized beliefs around who we should be from a culture that tells us it's not safe for us to be imperfect and messy, to be human, right? So because of this, it makes a lot of sense that when we want to give ourselves permission to dream our wildest dream and to explore what we've always wanted, we hit various challenges like self-sabotage. Has anyone experienced that? Emotional shutdown, fear of being judged and criticized, constantly wondering who we are to do this when there's so many people doing this better than us, and disowning parts of ourselves, right? So I'm here to say that rising into the greatest version of yourself is not about fitting into societal's expectations. We don't actually have to believe the stories that convince us that our lovability is tied to what other people think about us. There is actually a way that we can be free of believing that achievement and productivity is more important than sustainability and creativity. We don't have to believe the stories that tell that our worth is intricately tied to how much we make or how glamorous we make our lives look on Instagram, right? So this is about a reclamation. And in this 5-month journey, I will teach you the tools to support you in this reclamation journey, along with offering you an incubator with an incredible group of women who are going through a similar journey. And I believe that it is that incubation with the women going through this together with my support that will allow you the freedom necessary to be creative and innovative, self-expressed without the self-doubt, and bold in your voice and power. Okay. And so everything I teach in this program is a blend of women's psychology and holistic practices. It's both Eastern and Western holistic medicine and understanding of what it means to truly take in our worthiness. It is so good. You can expect this experience to be spacious, sensuous, and deeply, deeply rewarding. We have group coaching calls every week. We have an online community. It's just so rad. The ways that women have felt freer through this program. And because I know you've heard me talk about this program a lot, and obviously I love this program, I want to share a few words from someone who has previously been a part of Worthy Women Rise, so you can hear another woman's experience of this program. Hello, Megan. Thank you so much for taking some time to answer some questions about Worthy Women Rise.
Absolutely.
Before you signed up for Worthy Women Rise, like, what were the thoughts going on in your head? Like, what was happening in your life? What were you kind of navigating? What challenges were you experiencing that when you saw this program, you're like, oh, okay, like this could do it. This could support me.
Mm-hmm. I have struggled with anxiety for many years. Mm-hmm. So I had a constant feeling of worry about how I was being perceived by other people. So a lot of my thoughts and behaviors had to do with how can I put on the best picture for other people? How can I look like I'm doing enough and being enough and that I have it all together, when inside I never felt like I was enough. And yet simultaneously, I always felt like too much, too emotional, too sensitive. And I very much viewed myself as being, I use the term broken. Like there were so many things wrong with me that needed fixing. And I liked the idea of addressing worthiness because I've been doing therapy for many years. I'm a little bit of a self-help reader, collector. I guess that might be more of, I don't know, we could apply it. And I liked the idea of focusing on worthiness, and it made me curious what that would look like because I thought that was unachievable for me.
Yeah, so you felt like the idea of being worthy was totally out of your realm of possibilities.
Yes, like it seemed like it would be so much effort, and I already felt like I was putting so much effort into putting on this facade and trying to check all the boxes in my life that I thought would bring me happiness or a more, I don't know, a sense of purpose or a sense of peace. And I just never really knew that would be for me.
And so what attracted you to Worthy Women Rise?
Well, I originally found you, Thais, on a podcast, another life coach's podcast. And I was listening to the episode and I was just so drawn to your perspective, your way of looking at what people like to think of as brokenness or areas that they need to fix. And the way that you viewed those was very different. That people aren't in need of fixing, right? How can we soften into ourselves instead of trying to force change? So I went on your website, and it was like 3 weeks away from the deadline to apply for Worthy Women Rise. And so it just felt like my intuition pulled me there, and I just had to apply. And I did start the application like 2 or 3 times before I really submitted it, because I had a lot of the questions of, you know, am I worth this amount of money or time commitment? But it just, the feeling that I had that it was the perfect fit for me was just too strong that I was able to quiet those voices and
What was your biggest fear of of what you would have to do in the program?
I feel like it's a little bit like what I said earlier. So feeling like I am too much and not enough at the same time. So what if my problems are so much bigger than everyone else in the group? Or what if my problems are so minuscule in comparison to everyone else in the group? So I used that as an excuse to try to determine whether or not it was the right fit for me. Like the judgment of other people. How would I be perceived and how would I fit in? I think that was a big concern for me.
And so once you went through the program, what would you say was your, like the element of the program that most surprised and delighted you?
I really loved the connection that I developed with other women in the group. And I guess when I first applied, I didn't necessarily think that with the layout of the program being online and through video calls, more digital, that I would feel connected to people. And in reality, I felt so much more connected to these women than I did to friends in my own personal life, because we were able to have a space that was safe to share what you needed to share. I didn't feel like I was judged by other women. I felt like I was always supported, and in turn, I always felt like I had the energy to support them. I don't know, we just seemed to be able to accept and give what we could, and it always felt like enough and the right thing. And then you were there to guide us along the way too, obviously.
Yeah. What was really great is that every single group, like everyone comes into their roles, you know, and everyone kind of finds a home, a relationship with one another and within themselves in the group that just feels so natural. And then it becomes such a necessary part of the group. Like if one person kind of disappears, it kind of affects everybody else in the group.
Yes. I know the weeks that someone wouldn't be there for a call, I would think, you know, for the first 10 minutes, like, oh, is so-and-so going to show up? Because it didn't feel as cohesive when someone was missing. We really all served, like you said, we served a purpose. We had a role in the group that was, I don't know, really special.
And what was the favorite thing that you learned in the program?
Week 1 of the program was a lot about creating space and time. And it's something that I thought I had worked on already. And then when we started learning about it, I was like, oh my gosh, I still have so much to do. But that's the point, was it shouldn't be so much to do, so much space to do whatever you want. But that module and then the revisiting of that module for so many weeks has completely changed the way that I live my life now. Like I don't have anywhere close to as much internal struggle with taking time for myself, like spending an afternoon reading a book or, you know, choosing not to go to something I'm invited to because it just doesn't feel like what I want to use my time to do. And that's helped me create better boundaries at work, like the amount of time that I would spend at work, so that I have more time to do things that I enjoy or to literally do nothing at all.
Yeah, it was beautiful to watch your commitment with that module too. I mean, throughout the entire time, you were really committed to revisiting and implementing and finding ways to really investigate that voice of productivity. And it was really beautiful to kind of watch you unpack it and find what worked for you.
Yeah, I know that was a really good one. And I think my other probably most memorable module, or probably spanned over a few, was learning about attachment and attunement, relationships to your earliest caregivers, and then how that plays out in your current relationships. And then the idea of self-mothering. Exploring all of those topics has, I think, really strengthened my marriage with my husband, because it gave us so many different things to talk about in terms of why we respond to different situations in the ways that we do, because we're very different people. And so he would even do some of the quizzes and things that would be part of the assigned material. And it was fun because then we had like a whole new topic to talk about. When I learned so much more about him, kind of like why he is how he is, and vice versa. He got to learn that about me. And I feel like I've been able to accept some of the issues that I had maybe with the way that my parents managed my personality characteristics, I guess, growing up. I find that I can just be more of myself around them now, because I feel like I have, you know, partially grieved that I'm the relationship that we could have had, and now I just am trying to let it be exactly what it is. I don't feel as affected by every little thing that they say. I'm looking at relationships from a very different perspective.
I love that. Any final thoughts about your experience that you want people to know, or any takeaways that you want people to leave with?
I think the biggest takeaway would be that Worthy Women Rise isn't going to be a solution or a fix for you. I think that's what a lot of people go into it thinking, like, oh, I'll come out of the program and everything's going to be perfect. But gives so many tools and so much supportive guidance that I feel like when I do come up against roadblocks or issues or, new situations in my life that are challenging, because that's not going to go away, I just handle them so much better. I'm so much more in tune with what I need and how to manage what I'm experiencing. And so I think that really that's the greatest gift that you could ever receive from participating in anything, right? Is like your own independent ability to change your life, as opposed to someone else saying, do this, do that. It was very self-guided, but supported.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I really appreciate you. And it was just, you played such a beautiful role in the group. And I really love getting the opportunity to be in your life in such a magical way.
Thank you, Thais.
Oh my gosh, y'all. Isn't Megan just so darling? I really appreciate her sharing all those thoughts with me and with you all. If Worthy Women Rise feels like the right thing for you, you can go to worthywomenrise.com or go to link in the show notes to learn more and get that application in before Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific. That's 9 p.m. Eastern. Okay. So now that we've talked about Worthy Women Rise, I want to talk about the 3 habits of worth. What are habits of worth? So, a lot of the work that I do is a 2-pronged approach, right? We both have to address the underlying pain of the worthiness wound and the relationship with the worthiness wound and heal our relationship with ourselves and that part of us. And we do this through reparenting work. We do this through all sorts of different modalities. That's really important because if we just try to change our habits without changing the underlying reason why we developed those habits in the first place, we're just going to cultivate other habits. There's just going to be another thing to pop up because we cultivate these habits that now feel really problematic. Let's say disordered eating, over-exercising, these types of habits, right? We cultivate them for a very specific reason, to protect ourselves in whatever way. They serve a purpose. And if we're not getting to the pain that purpose is trying to cover up, we're just going to go somewhere else. So it's really, really important to look at the worthiness wound. And I've been talking about that a lot on Instagram. So you can go check that out at instagram.com/IamThaisSky. And then it's a 2-pronged approach, right? Because we have to do that as well as develop new habits that cultivate our sense of worth. If our sense of worth is unshakable within all of us and all we have to do is get out of our own way, well, these are the habits that teach us how to get out of our own way, right? These are the habits that promote this idea that, oh, I am worthy. Oh, right, I am worthy. Oh, right, I am worthy. But instead of it just being a mental process, it becomes internalized. So 2-pronged approach. What I want to talk to you all right now is that second prong of cultivating habits of worth, habits that support our worthiness. Habits that, while by themselves aren't enough, they are also an important component to our healing. Okay? Okie dokie. So, first habit of worth that I want to talk about is this idea of depersonalization. So, part of a fully developed human, like someone who has done their healing work, is recognizing that other people's behaviors aren't a reflection of us. It's not always personal. Sometimes it is personal. It's not always personal. And when we make things really personal, what happens? We get shut down. We spiral in our unworthiness. We feel triggered. We feel like someone's attacking us. We feel, we then discern what's happening in the world. We look at the world through the lens of this is about me. Now, if we're wounded, it makes sense that we are constantly having to think about ourselves, right? There is a certain amount of healthy narcissism. There is a certain amount of having to really look at who we are and own who we are. And then there is the taking things way personally. And that's this habit of depersonalization. is cultivating the habit of remembering and bringing inwards the sense that it's not about me. So much of what someone is experiencing is not about me. Now, how do we know though, right? If it's about you or if it's not about you? There's a lot of assuming that's done here in Thais Town. I love to take things personally, and I love to do that by making a lot of assumptions about why people are doing what they're doing. And my assumptions tend to be more persecutory in nature. I wonder if that resonates with you. Like, I tend to think the worst. Like, if I don't hear from someone that I texted a long time ago, it's because they hate me, not because they're busy, right? I make it be about me. And so when we put that personalization and believing that it is about us, then we inhibit curiosity. Maybe they're not talking to us because it is about us, or maybe not. And that curiosity requires space, and we can't cultivate that space if we're too busy making it be about us. So something that I've been learning a lot, I mean, this has been one of my biggest lessons as of late, this habit of worth, is believing people's positive intentions. Believing that people are not out to get me has been so difficult. And the way that I've been kind of working on this and cultivating this and learning about this, right? Like the way that I've been approaching this habit of depersonalization is whenever I notice myself assuming the worst, right? Whenever I notice myself getting way ahead of myself and believing that it has something to do about me, I take some breaths. I do the number two thing I want to talk about, the second habit of worth. These are all definitely intricately connected. So I do the number two step. I take some breaths and I just name it, right? I name that I'm taking it personal. Instead of criticizing myself like, oh, I can't believe I'm taking it personal, I kind of give myself space to just name, oh, I'm taking this really personal. I'm believing this about what's happening here. And once we can name that, we start to give ourselves space. And then the second step in that is then getting curious. That's when the inquiry comes in of like, hey, I haven't heard from you today. Is everything okay? What's going on? Kind of asking the question. Hey, I noticed that you didn't sit next to me. I'm making up a lot of stories that it's about me. I'd love to hear from you, right? Like the more honest and vulnerable we can get, the better the conversation will go. I love this is the story I'm making this be. Like this is like you behaved in this way. This is the story that I'm making that behavior mean. Is that accurate? Most of the times, I'm telling you all, most of the times it is so not accurate. So much of what we think, oh, I intuitively know they're mad at me, is like literally nothing to do with you at all. And so getting to this place of depersonalization is really important because once we can cultivate that space of asking, hey, is this about me or not? Then we can do something about it. Cool. So the habit of worth of depersonalization is really naming when you are taking something personal, getting clear what story you're making, and then taking some breaths, tending to yourself, tending to the wound, doing number two, which I'll talk about in a minute, of the habits of worth, and then asking, because it may actually be personal, right? It may actually be that they are upset with you. That could happen, but it may not always be. And so I don't believe that nothing is personal. I do believe that we are in relationship with each other, but I don't believe that we have to do it all on our own. We don't have to figure out everything about the relationship by ourselves. And this is a tendency that many of us have when we had to figure out a lot of stuff by ourselves when we were little. And again, this has been very personal to me. I'm talking directly from a lot of personal experiences the past few weeks, where I've become really attuned to the fact that like I really have believed that I have to do everything on my own. And so now undoing that has meant attempting to make sense of things together with other people. And if I could change the name of this podcast, I would change it to Making Sense Together, because I think that is the curative effect of the healing work, is learning how we can make sense of things together with other people. We don't have to live off of our assumptions, believe that those assumptions are true, and act from those assumptions. We can actually attempt to navigate the world with other people. That is also, side note, why I love Worthy Women Rise, is because you get that through the sisterhood and through the coaching with me. But anyway, depersonalization is the first habit of worth, okay? The second habit of worth, the one that goes intricately tied together, I call the objectification of the wound. And like I was telling this to one of my one-on-one clients, and I was like, this is the only time that it's acceptable to objectify something, and she thought it was hilarious, because of course what I'm referring to is our culture, our patriarchal cultures, tendency to objectify women's bodies, right? That is not okay. That's not what we're talking about here. When we're talking about objectification of the wound, what we're talking about is seeing if we can separate who we are from this wounded place within us. We all carry wounded places within us. We may carry abandonment wounds, worthiness wound, the mother wound, the father wound. I mean, we call it, wound because it's similar to a physical wound in that it's an emotional need that needs to be met. And so we all have these wounded places within us, but they are not all of who we are. We are actually a greater whole than all of these broken parts. And so the problem is when the wound is kind of really activated, we tend to lose sight of that and we fall into this narrative of believing that we are the wound, right? I am unworthy. That means all of who I am is insignificant and unworthy. And in that we erase all of the times that we have felt worthy, all of the times that we have felt whole, all of the times that we have felt joy, etc., etc. And so by objectifying the wound, what I'm referring to here is the capacity through the other healing modalities like meditation, yoga, slowing down, cultivating space. This is module 1 in Worthy Women Rise. Through that process of making space, we can start to recognize when we've fallen into the spiral of the worthiness wound. And this is also another module in Worthy Women Rise where we actually learn how to name and identify that the worthiness wound is at play and the beliefs that are associated with the worthiness wound. But as we do that work, what we find is that we're starting to able to name, this is the worthiness wound that I'm spiraling into. This is the voice of the worthiness wound. And the minute we do that, y'all, the minute we can say, that's the voice of the worthiness wound, we are no longer identified with the worthiness wound. And that space where we no longer identify with the worthiness wound is the space necessary to then decide something differently, to then do something differently. When we are consumed with the worthiness wound, there is nothing we can do. We're very stuck in believing that story that we are inadequate, that we are unworthy, and that all of these beliefs are true. But when we can name that, this is just a part of me, this is just the worthiness wound speaking, suddenly there is a greater I in this picture, right? There's an I who can name that the worthiness wound is speaking to me, but I am not the worthiness wound. That is the objectification of the wound because we are starting to separate ourselves from the wound. And so one of the ways that we can continue this exercise of objectifying the wound is imagining the wound as a physical object. You can do this through a guided meditation. You can do this through drawing. You can do this through visualization. There's so many ways you can do this. But if you're able to identify the space within you that feels this worthiness wound, and then you can place it inside of an object, like, if I were to put this as an object, it would be this. It would be a sad, dying, decaying tree, or it's like a shoe that I've left at the back of my closet. But whatever it is, if we can objectify the wound into a physical object, then we can even see it even more clearer. It's no longer just a voice; it's now an object. Another way of objectifying the wound could be placing this wound within the caricature of a human. However the way that feels comfortable for you. Maybe it's a part of you that is very, very gross looking, very neglected looking. That works as well. Like imagining that person versus you. So it's a part of us, right? The worthiness one is a very real part of us, but it is not all of who we are. And the more that we can do that separation through these different tools, the more we can then be like, okay, what need is not being met here, right? And that's the ultimate question. What need is not being met? Worthiness wound is usually a signal that something bad is it feels like something bad is here because of fear. It feels like you're, reaching a new level of your success, or you're feeling like, what am I trying to say? Like you've reached a plateau where you're about to go into a next level, okay? Right? Like that's when the worthiness wound typically appears. Like we're asked to step up in a bigger way. And so fear typically accompanies the worthiness wound. And so as much as we can name these different parts of ourselves, the more we can then tend to our unmet needs. It's so funny. There's a bird twittering outside the window, and I feel like I'm screaming into the mic to be louder than the bird. I love it. I love that I get to hear the birds even though I live in the middle of LA. I live in a really cool neighborhood. Okay. Final habit of worth. All of these are intricately tied, but this one is really, really important and can be done all of it on its own. And it's also extremely difficult. It's this concept of, I know it's going to be mind-blowing to you, slowing it down. Slowing it down. Now, slowing it down sounds easy. It is actually extremely difficult. And while this is module 1 of Worthy Women Rise, you will not believe how much resistance I get to slowing things down, because when we slow things down, we have to deal with the fact that we've been using all of these things, the TV and the radio and the things, to numb ourselves. And so if we're no longer using these tools to numb, we have to directly sit with the fact that we have a worthiness wound in the first place. So much of us aren't even aware that we're feeling unworthy and inadequate because we're just in such a rat race of trying to get things done. And so one of the questions I like to ask myself in terms of slowing down and is first noticing when I'm getting really speedy, when I feel like I have to do a lot and I have to be a lot and I have to do all these things. This happened in this launch, actually. I've done a lot for this beautiful launch. Converting 21 videos into 10 days of worth was a lot of work. And I noticed myself feeling like, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. I have to do more. This isn't enough. And so really slowing it down and being like, okay, so all of these things that I've been doing is a distraction from what? From feeling unworthy. Okay, how can I touch into that? How can I tend to that? Again, what unmet need is here, right? Objectifying the wound, depersonalization of separating myself from this launch. This launch is going to go the way it's go, but it is in no way a testament to my worth and who I am in the world. Whether this launch goes successfully or not is not a statement of my worth. That is the case for everything. Whatever happens in my life is not a testament to my worth. Whether I make a mistake, whether I end up in prison, if I make $1 million, if I become, the next Oprah, whatever it is not a statement of my worth. We are all worthy humans. And so then it's grounding myself in those things. Then it's about leaning into trust. This is a big one. This is hard. It is hard to lean into trust. It's hard to believe that what we're doing is enough, isn't it? I just love that question so much. I ask this to myself all the time because the questions that we ask ourselves is the quality of the questions that we ask ourselves determines the quality of the answers that we give, right? Whatever we ask for, we get. In terms of when we ask a question to ourselves, we typically get an answer, right? Our brain tends to answer it. So the question I love to ask is, what if what I am doing is enough? Maybe not enough to get the $1 million I want, but our worthiness isn't connected to that, right? What if what I was doing was enough to feel enough? What if I am enough? What if this were enough? Right? Again, we're tapping into the belief that we are enough and nothing that we do or not do affects that. We are fully enough. So in this kind of habit of worth, what we're leaning into is trust. We're leaning into this idea of surrender and believing that we are full right now. And we don't have to believe that. But what if we were to act as if we did? We don't have to always feel worthy, but what if we acted like we did? Now, surrender is a really difficult concept, and it's actually the second to final concept, or actually I think it's it's one of the final modules of Worthy Women Rise, because it's really hard to internalize this idea of surrender, particularly because so much of what we have learned to do is control. And it often feels like surrender is the opposite of control, when it's not. Surrender is a mechanism of knowing when to control and when not to control. It is the both and. Surrender is all of it. Stepping into flow, being in ease is all of those things. It's controlling and not controlling. So, it's an important question for us to be asking ourselves, what if this were enough? And then wherever we feel like it doesn't feel like enough, again, unmet need. Again, habit number 2, habit number 1. And what we're doing here with this question and with all of these habits is creating a life where our worthiness is at the forefront. Creating a life where foundationally we know that we are worthy and we set ourselves up for that, so that when unworthiness comes up and, when we feel like these habits aren't working, we have a foundation to work from. Again, this is the two-pronged approach. This is just prong one. This is not all sufficient. However, it is important for us to be constantly checking our thoughts and wondering, where is this coming from? Is this culture? Is this inner critic? Is, internalized voice from culture? Is this internalized voice from parents? Is this like true inner critic stuff? Like, what is this voice? And how is this voice perpetuating this narrative that I am unworthy? And what if I were enough? Like, how would I be different right now? What would I do differently? How would I meet myself differently? Because if we truly believed that we were enough, our unworthiness wouldn't be a threat, right? If we truly believed that we were enough, it's not that we would become indifferent to life. We would be more engaged in life. And so this is a question that I received, from a listener on Instagram. They asked, something along the lines of, I'm scared that if I really feel truly worthy, I'm not going to want to continue to change and grow. And that understanding, that question comes from a belief that our unworthiness is what's fueling us to change and grow. But actually, our unworthiness is fueling us to continue to believe that we are inadequate and that we have to do all these things to feel worthy. Coming from unworthiness isn't the type of change I think that many of us want. I think the change and growth that many of us want comes from a deep place of knowing that we are radically worthy and the difference that would make. You don't have to be coming from inadequacy in order to cultivate the change that you want to create. And in fact, when we feel worthy and we feel full and we feel in that sense of radical self-acceptance, what happens is we want to continue to grow and change, but it's not coming from a deficiency. It's coming from a fullness. It's coming from a belief that we are already whole and that we are just moving closer and closer towards that wholeness because there's nothing broken here. We are not broken. We are not problems that need to be fixed. That is not who we are as humans. We have systems that are broken and need to be fixed, yes, but we are not broken and we do not need to be fixed, even if we've made mistakes. There's a way to be accountable to ourselves. There's a way of taking responsibility for ourselves that doesn't include self-annihilation. And that's the narrative that the self-development world has been feeding us for so long, that we have to feel shitty about ourselves in order for us to grow and change. But that is just not true. We get to grow and change because we love ourselves so radically. We get to grow and change because we want to be better for ourselves and for the people around us, not because we are unworthy. That is a totally different way of seeing things and seeing the world. And that is what I'm inviting for all of us, is a different way of seeing ourselves. What I do in Worthy Women Rise is really indoctrinate a new set of principles that, you get to be fully, radically whole right now. You are worthy right now. You may not sense it, you may not feel it, you may not be it, but that's okay. So for all of you, remember this. You are enough. And wherever you don't feel that way, that is where the work begins. That is the invitation. That is where we get to start the exploration. And these 3 habits of worth, depersonalization, objectification of the wound, and trusting, slowing down, and believing that this is enough are 3 ways that we can get there. I hope this is supportive of you, for you. I love Worthiness Season. I love getting to talk about all this with you. Clearly, this is something that's very near and dear to my heart because it's something I navigate every day. I'm not this perfect, worthy, being. I am worthy, but I don't always feel it. But I don't spiral in self-pity when I feel unworthy. I now have the tools that I know how to navigate it when I get there. And that makes all the difference. Okay? So I'm not this perfect person speaking from a pedestal. I'm right in the trenches with you all. I know that this sucks. I know that this hurts. And I also know that there's so much on the other side and that we get to believe in that every single day. I'm sending you all of my love, and I will talk to you all next week. Thank you for listening to Reclaim the Podcast. This podcast represents the opinions of Thais Sky and her guests to the show. The content of this podcast are for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional psychological, psychiatric, or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental disorder.